Okay, welcome to Practical Psychology Podcast, Episode 1. I'm Joseph Wong.
And I'm Tara Steinberg, co host of the podcast.
And I'm Alison Ku, also a co host of this podcast.
Today we're so excited here, starting with Tara. Tara, I know you are going to the field here, combining both psychotherapy and law here. Tell me a little bit about how does it work?
Yeah, so I actually have been a practicing lawyer for the last decade or so, maybe a little bit older. And it's an interesting story how things changed during COVID, and everyone was kind of feeling miserable. I was as well. And it just dawned on me that I really didn't want to be a lawyer anymore, and I could be less miserable and do something that really spoke to my personality. So I had a background already in psychology from my undergrad degree, and it just seemed like the right fit for me. And actually, it turns out that having a background in law has been really helpful for this career in psychotherapy. There are a lot of more similarities than you'd think. You're helping people break down problems, and you're helping people see things from different perspectives. These are all things that I was able to use in my law career as well.
Wow. And so, Tara, here, when people think about law, they're watching Netflix, law, high pressure, suits and nice clothing. Tell me about the pressure in law and the pressure in psychotherapy. Yeah.
Yeah, they both can be high pressure. They're a little bit different. The pressure in law, especially if you're working at a large corporation, which was one of the things I did as a lawyer, there's a lot of pressure around you to perform and to perform in the way that your bosses want you to perform. Um, in psychotherapy, there's pressure because you really have a lot of people's lives in your hands a lot of the time, and that can be a lot of pressure, and you don't want to burn out with stressing out about that. But there are ways, of course, to make sure that doesn't happen and to be aware. And thankfully we have all these ethical standards as well that make it easy for us to do that. But I do work actually now with professionals who are dealing with the same kind of um, same pressures and same experiences that I had at big law firms. Often there's trouble getting work life balance. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, which I think is actually also kind of true of when I started out this new psychotherapy profession. Any new profession, it's very common to have a little bit of imposter syndrome and feel like you're um, not, you're not ready yet or you're not experienced enough. So now I have the ability to help others with those problems as well.
Well, yeah, Tara, it's interesting you talk about the imposter syndrome. In law here, especially as people envision it, there are tons of documents here. You have multiple clients sitting across the table from you, and you have to be quickly identify what are the key issues before bringing to the judge. When they are
Yeah,
talking a
yeah.
lot of things, see how does it work?
So yeah, I mean, there's two elements to it. I mean, you want to be really prepared before you're in front of the judge, although there's a lot of pressure from those judges because they can be pretty tough sometimes when you're standing up in front of them. But preparation is key, and when you're preparing,
Oh.
you really want to see the case from like a bird's eye view, right? Which is what I actually tell my clients is a really good method for trying to get perspective on their lives and also to increase their emotional regulation. You want to try to get all the facts together, and then you want to also be able to start seeing how those facts go together and how to tell a compelling story to the judge about your client
Mm.
that furthers their goals. So you can do the same thing, I think, in therapy as
Wow.
well. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So, for example, if you take a more narrative therapy approach, that's essentially what you're doing with the clients. You're having them their first kind of perception of their story.
Mm.
And we see it, and usually it seems to be governed a lot of the time by their emotions, their thoughts. I'm sure both of you are familiar with this and how those really can affect the way you see yourself in your life story. And then you work with your client to really rewrite that narrative in a
Mm.
way that is more positive and more strengths based, and that allows them to see the parts of themselves that are more positive that they often don't give themselves credit for.
Is that something that you're often using with your clients, narrative therapy, or are there other approaches that you like to lean on?
That's a great question. I have used some narrative therapy. I do tailor my approach to the client. So
Mhm.
some of them respond really well to a narrative therapy approach or other more experiential approaches. And then for some of them, they want a little bit more structure or more insight. So I would say I probably use a mix of dialectical behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, a little bit of psychoanalysis, and a little bit of experiential techniques.
Nice.
Oh, that's fascinating. Oh, 1 second here. We have some questions with some live viewers here. They're asking, they know that Tara and Allison, you both do couple and family counseling with multiple people having different ideas here. They want to know, how do you identify the issues? Like in law, people don't agree. Allison, do you
Yeah,
have any questions for Tara there?
Well, mostly just how do you manage that? I'd really be interested in hearing what that's like and how, yeah, how you manage that.
yeah, I mean, carefully. Um, I think it's important, especially in couples counseling, to be really neutral and put yourself in the mind of being the mediator. And I think it's important in couples therapy not to be afraid to take a little bit of control of the session, because there are a lot of people, and the last thing you want is for it to become a screaming match. So I do a lot of directing of, one part of the couple to say to the other uh, couple like what they heard, how it made them feel. So really a lot of kind of techniques to have them try to figure out what's actually happening and to start to change those patterns that they may be in where, and I'm sure you've seen this too, Allison, where, they're on their own path and they're talking over their partner, and it's often quite part of the issues they're having is because they're not truly listening to their partner on a deeper level.
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, I find that in those situations, um, I totally agree. They're not listening and they're so heightened emotionally that sometimes the simplest thing is to, um, I guess, help them regulate their emotions before we can actually start having a productive conversation. And I think that can be so interesting, how, uh, how it takes a little while before you can kind of get to that, when you start working with a new couple or a new family.
And how do you go about regulating their emotions at the beginning of the session?
Yeah, that's a good question. I find that every time it's something different, but sometimes it's, something as simple as, well, interrupting them, getting comfortable, sort of, setting the stage and, knowing when to sort of interrupt when you're starting to kind of catch that. But I found, simply, even things that um, that are really basic, like take a break, go for a quick walk, wash your hands with cold water, like really simple uh, techniques like that have been so impactful for changing the course of the conversation, even in the session. But I'm curious what you found to be helpful in situations like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have on occasion, like I think the breath work can be really important. And sometimes just telling the clients to stop. I agree with that. That's a really good strategy because um, they can definitely get ahead of themselves. Um, on occasion, if I have a couple that's really quite emotionally dysregulated and tends to get into more um, emotional conversations, I might start the session out with a little quick mindfulness exercise,
Hmm.
just to get everybody already into a calmer headspace. That can be pretty effective.
I love that. And I would even add to that that sometimes it's really great to end the session with a mindfulness exercise too, if it's been a really emotional, highly charged session. It's amazing watching the change in the clients at the end of something like that.
You know, Allison, I hadn't really thought about doing that, but I actually love it. I'm sure it really helps the clients kind of leave. I mean, we, as therapists, we want the clients to be able to take it home and apply it at home, right? We call it generalization, but that's what it is. We just want them to not do all the work in the session, but to keep doing the work at home. And doing this mindfulness exercise before they leave could be a great way to nurture that for the client.
Yeah, I agree because there have been times where sometimes I'll hear at the end of a session, uh, I feel worse. Or maybe in the next session I'll hear, I really thought about that for like I thought about what we talked about. It really stayed with me. And I think it's good when you're doing it's good to open up those things and address them in session, but I think of it almost like closing the lid on something just temporarily so that they can still get on with their day, especially if you happen to have a session in the middle of their working day. Like you want them to be able to go back to work and focus. Um, so yeah, I found that that was something I started to introduce uh, based on feedback from the client.
Yeah. Feedback is so important.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how, how you're, how often you ask for feedback. Are your clients comfortable with feedback? How do you incorporate that into your work?
That's such a good question. I would say I'm still kind of figuring out the best way. Most of the time, I will, especially when I'm just getting to know a client, I will ask at the end of the session how things went, how they're feeling. I usually do like a feeling check at the end. And if I notice that they're seeming dysregulated, I might take a few extra minutes to add in some kind of grounding exercise. Um, I've actually, I myself have attended therapy. And something that my previous therapist used to do was at the end of every session, they would ask a series of questions, um, like a rating scale question. And it seemed a little repetitive at times, but what it did do was it was a great way to introduce conversation. So if I said, "Oh, I felt like a 5 out of 10," but then the next week I said 4, that was enough to say, "Well, it's lower than last week. What's going on?" And
Mm.
that was a great way to elicit feedback. So I've thought about introducing something like that into my sessions. Curious to hear your thoughts on that, and how do you um, how do you elicit feedback?
Um, I I like the scaling idea that you're talking about because it does also create a bit of a tracking mechanism for your clients so they can actually look back and see their improvement, which sometimes people lose sight of when things take a dip, as they often do in life and in therapy. Um, I'm a little bit more kind of upfront with asking for feedback. I usually inform them at our first session that it's something that I'm going to ask them for, and also that that they should feel free to to just give me feedback if they feel uncomfortable in any way, if they have a question. I tell them I'm not easily offended or upset, so really it's better if we're very honest with each other, even about the uncomfortable things. So I try to set it up right away at the beginning and then try to remind them towards the end of sessions.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think that's something that is built into in my informed consent. And um, I find that also starting the session as well, asking early on. Like I like that you kind of I like that you mentioned this is something that you really set up from the beginning, because it's like you're setting up this safe space to feel comfortable to provide the feedback. And when you're asking for it, then I find that if you just directly ask, you tend to get something, even if it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it was fine. Like you can read between the lines and know where to dig a little bit. So I think that's a good point, is to, yeah, bring it up really early on and make it feel comfortable to do so.
Yeah, almost
Alison
every.
here.
Oh, go ahead.
We
Sorry,
have a
Joseph.
live viewer here has questions. They look at your LinkedIn account. They are very curious about your background in high tech, the UX design, and all that. And I know you want to build your practice combining both to benefit a lot of people in the tech industry. Can you tell a little bit more? I know nothing about UX here.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So my background is in research. I started out my career as a market researcher, and then I transitioned over to UX research, or user experience research. And similar to Tara, I had been um, wanting to pivot into psychotherapy for several years. I'm a little embarrassed to admit how many years, but the pandemic really was the catalyst for inspiring me to actually take action on, um, moving in. If we're talking about stages of change, I was in that pre-contemplation, contemplation stage for so long, and it was really the pandemic and experiencing burnout in tech. It was a crazy time. It's still crazy right now. But yeah, just I was finding that most of the joy that I was feeling in my role was supporting my colleagues who were also experiencing burnout and just wanting to learn more, do more. Um, so yeah, I started volunteering at a crisis center, and that really gave me the confidence to take that next step after that. So I don't know if I answered that question. Was there anything else they were wondering about, or um, anything else that
Oh
I could
yeah,
address?
because they are very curious to know about the research in nature. In the past, they would do the research, and now in law research or psychotherapy research, you have to combine a lot of ideas to generate solutions here. How does it work here, Alison?
Yeah, so I was a mixed methods researcher, and what that means is I did a combination of like quantitative research, so um, looking at large bodies of or large data sets and looking for themes. And then I also did qualitative research, which was uh, working with smaller populations or smaller groups. And often that meant one on one interviews with individuals. And so in that case, you're really stepping back and you're trying to understand these people. You're trying to understand what their issues are, what their problems are, and how they're using different services or products in their lives, where they're struggling, and really trying to understand what is the root cause of their problems and what are they trying to achieve, and in what way can we make that overall experience better for them. So it really comes down to knowing what questions to ask and doing it in a way that is not biased, doing it in a way that is very investigative, exploratory, and all the while trying to kind of look at the bigger picture, the context, and be able to discern between what they say they want and what they actually need. And so I think those are the skills that have been really helpful for me moving into psychotherapy. And something you said, Tara, earlier about performance, I just wanted to highlight that is something that is really prevalent as well, that pressure to perform, have impact. And that pressure can be I can only imagine I can't imagine what it's like in law, but I can only imagine, or from my perspective in tech, like it is paralyzing for a lot of
Mm,
people,
yeah.
especially with the state of tech right now and with how AI is going. So, yeah, when you said imposter syndrome, I was nodding. When you were saying like that, yeah, that pressure to perform and burnout, like all those things are things that I'm also really interested in because I experienced them firsthand, but I also know that they're still really prevalent in the industry as well.
I
Wow,
actually found it
excellent. Yeah.
fascinating what you said there, Allison, about the research and how much analyzing behavior there was. I wouldn't have expected tech to have that behavioral component to it, but really it's quite a natural, it seems quite a natural transition into psychotherapy. You're looking at patterns, you're trying to figure out how behaviors affect how people act, even if they're not showing it completely to you in session. So that's really fascinating, how those skills can really transfer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good here. So let's take a short break here. We can allow more questions from our live viewers here, and we will be back here.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.